Hey there, my name is Steve Gearhart, and as always, this is the Unagi Observer. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching this week's video. How are you doing? Are you doing okay? I hope you're doing okay. I hope you're having a good day. That'd be really cool if you're having a good day. Why don't you let me know down below what anime you're watching, what you like, what you don't like. If you're having a good day, tell me what's making your day good. Don't know why I want to know. I just want to know. Just want to say hi through the digital media. Anyway, so let's get on with the video. One of the things I want to talk about real briefly is the One Piece trailer that came out, the live action. Okay. I hope it gets a better trailer. I'm not impressed. To be fair, I don't read or watch One Piece. I've, read a couple of the manga. I've seen a couple episodes. I think the cosplay is pretty cool, but other than that, I'm not a huge One Piece fan. But I was intrigued that of all the anime that you can do a live action to, this is the one they decided to do it to. I guess because it's popular, obviously. But watched the trailer and I was just not. It didn't grab me. I guess that's the thing. It didn't grab me, and the CGI. The one real CGI aspect of it, or actually there's two of it, with Luffy's arm was not impressive. So fingers crossed for you One Piece fans that the trailer gets, that the further trailers offer something more meaningful and that will grab and doesn't look like it might be another Netflix disaster like Death Note. Honestly, I don't want that to happen. I really don't, and I hope that it actually does well. I really do. I want it to do well. So keep your fingers crossed. Okay, so the topic of this week's video is I was going to do a review, but I'm kind of on the fence on the anime that I'm watching, and I think if I watch another 2 episodes, I'll firmly come down on one side or the other. So I'll do that for next week. So for this week, we're going to talk about if I produced anime, what anime would I make? So I have my personal choices of things that I would like to see from books in particular, not manga, not other anime, not other things, but actual books. So here are some books or written stories that I would like to see in anime form, if I was a producer and had money to be able to do it. Alright, so I'm going to apologize in advance in case I've already mentioned one of these books or stories before. I've done this kind of list a couple times, so if I repeat, my apologies. So let's start with the first one that I would like to see as an anime, and that is Anne Rice's The Mummy, or Ramses the Damned. For those of you who know Anne Rice, of course you know Anne Rice because of Interview with the Vampire, Lestat, Queen of the Damned, all those vampire movies, blah 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 blah. She also wrote a bunch of other stuff, and one other series that she wrote that is actually in what I call her vampire universe is The Mummy, or Ramses the Damned. And I kind of, when I think about it, I think about it as a 4 to 6 episode OVA, 30 minutes an episode. I don't think it needs to be longer than that. The book itself is an easy and relatively short read compared to her other works, and it's actually a fun kind of read. So the story, the plot of it, the reason why I think it should be in anime is very simply this. So it's set in 1914, right before World War I, London, England, and it revolves around a family that are shipping magnates in the British Empire. So they have this huge shipping trade empire that they control. So they're rich people, and because that's kind of how Anne Rice writes about. She writes about the rich and lovely. And anyway, and at that time, it's the Edwardian age, so King Edward, and what was often done between the 1800s and up to about World War I was that if you were a rich person, or if you were a son of a lord or noble, you did the tour, and the tour was usually you visit parts of the British Empire, you come back and you have stories to tell and things to show, and a place to that was visited quite often between the 1890s and World War I was Egypt. And what was often expected of you was that if you went on this tour and this is where you went, you were to bring things back. You were to bring things of historical and cultural significance of this part of the British Empire. And so you would bring these artifacts, these relics, things back, and you would have some for your own personal, things to look at or to show to your friends. And then there would be another part of it that you would actually donate or lease or lend to various museums for the public to see. And during this time, mummies were a big thing to see, because it was something that, mummies aren't really something that you see outside of Egypt in Europe. I mean, yeah, you see kind of mummified things, but the Egyptians had it down to an art, whereas in the rest of Europe, it was just kind of like, okay, we're going to wrap a shroud around this guy and just throw him in the dirt. The Egyptians had a whole process, the whole 9 yards. And so this family, they went on the tour and they brought these things back. They put it on lease to the museum, and they brought back a very fancy sarcophagus, and it claimed to have the body of Ramses in it. Of course, everyone's just like, probably not, but what the hell? Here it is. This is what we think it is. And it's put into the museum, and the lovely young lady, who is the heroine of this novel, one day opens up the blinds to get a better view of the mummy inside, and she leaves the window open, and the sunlight comes in and hits the mummy, and the mummy revives over a period of hours. And yes, it is Ramses. The rest of the novel is basically Ramses coming into the Edwardian age, how he adapts to it, and of course there's a romance between the lady and Ramses. And then there's subterfuge, plots, things happening. There's something sinister going on in the company itself, and they go to Egypt to try to air out the grievances, so to speak. And when they get down there, they acquire, just because that's what you do, acquire more artifacts and relics and mummies. And one of them happens to be a very special person, and she has gone totally insane when she is revived. So there you go. I think that is the story right there, and I'm going to leave it at that in case you want to read the book. The book does eventually go into a number of a series of other books for that. One of the big themes about Anne Rice's novels, like the vampire novels and the mummy novels, is the idea of immortality and cheating death, and that's a big thing that goes on in a big theme that goes on in her books, and The Mummy is no exception. All right, so let's go on to the next one. If I Had Money to Make Anime. So this next book is the only true Japanese novel in this list that I have for you today. It's called Shinjuku Shark. It's by Armasa Osawa. And it is a police procedural kind of drama thing. Now, Osawa's books of this nature, Shinjuku Shark, are very popular in Japan. We don't really see that much of it here. As a matter of fact, I've only read Shinjuku Shark. I got it from my library. Support your local library. And it is a very good crime novel. The premise is, of course, that there is a cop killer out there, and it turns out that he's not just a cop killer for the Yakuza. He's not even working with the Yakuza. He's actually just a serial killer of cops. So Shinjuku Shark is the tale of a disgraced detective who is kind of working the police box, so to speak, and of course he gets wrapped back into homicide and is trying to figure out who is killing his fellow cops. It is a hard-boiled police drama, so if you're into that kind of thing, it's actually a very good book. If you can find it, I encourage you to read it. It's a very good read. It's hard to put down. So I think it would make a great anime movie. I mean, this is one of those things where I think if Satoshi Kon were still alive, he would actually might consider making this movie, even though it's not kind of mentally weird. It's still kind of just got that Satoshi Kon feel to it, almost. But what some of the other interesting aspects about this is that it actually also talks about how police work in Japan, and gun culture in Japan particularly, and the fact that there are two ways to get guns in Japan. Either you purchase them illegally or bring them in, or for criminals, or the criminals will find an armorer and actually have them made, and that's an important part of this whole story. So I think if you want a gritty kind of just like cop drama, just hard-boiled, Chow Yun-Fat kind of thing going on, this is good. I think this would be very, very entertaining. It's a little dark, a little grim, just a little bit. For those of you out there who are familiar with Osawa's work and you're able to find other books of his, please let me know where you found them and down below so that I might be able to get to read the other stuff. And I do believe Shinjuku Shark, I'm not 100% sure on this. If someone can clarify this, that would be great. I think it is in manga form as well. All right, so Shinjuku Shark, please drama. Okay, for this next one, we're going cyberpunk, because who doesn't like cyberpunk, especially after cyberpunk edge runners? So this book is called Thin Air by Richard K. Morgan. If Richard K. Morgan sounds familiar to you, it should, because he's the guy who wrote the Altered Carbon series. His books have been made into live action on Netflix. An anime of a story outside of the books was made, very good. And I think that this book, Thin Air, should be made into probably what I say, how many episodes? I think it should be episodic, and I think it can run for like 26 episodes. But it's a one-shot deal, so like at the end of it, it's kind of done. So the story, the premise of this anime, and it would be great if Studio Trigger did it, right? Because they did such a great job with Edge Runners. So Thin Air takes place on Mars. In the books, Thin Air is the sequel to 13, for those of you who want to know. So it's in that universe, not the Altered Carbon universe. So anyway, the story takes place on Mars, on one of the inhabited places of Mars, and it is a detective story. So the main character is what's called a Black Hatch Man, and basically he's genetically engineered to stay in stasis hibernation. Like his body will automatically go into hibernation and is built to do that. He has various genetic functions that makes him a little bit superior to other people, a little bit greater strength, a little bit greater speed, better eyesight, ears, the whole 9 yards. And he is trained to use what are called lenses, which are connected to your brain and enables you to like look at things, download things, and if you have a good pair of goggles, like his is Osiris, you can hack into stuff and take control of things like that. So very cyberpunky. And he is a freelance, now a freelance detective on Mars, stuck on Mars, because going back home is very expensive. There's actual lottery for it to go back to Earth if you want to. So people who come to Mars, unless they have a contract to come back, are stuck on Mars. Now, the city that they have on there is, of course, the gritty cyberpunk, Blade Runner-ish kind of thing going on there. Everyone's crooked. The cops are crooked. And this audit from Earth, this corporation called Colin, that owns everything on Mars, sending in auditors suddenly for some reason, and he has to play bodyguard to one of those people, one of the auditors, and things go massively wrong. It is very much a cyberpunk story. If you're familiar with Altered Carbon, you know what you're getting into. It's very much in that vein, particularly the first book. So it's a very enjoyable read. I think this is something like if Studio Trigger were to do it, it would be a 26 episodes, because there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of world building. There's a lot of character building. It's just a well-told story, generally speaking. And I think it deserves an anime treatment. Not the Netflix treatment, live action treatment, mind you, but maybe an anime treatment. So, Thin Air, Richard K. Morgan. If you haven't read it, give it a read. Okay, we are going old school here. Okay, you ready for this one? Conan, the animated series, right? Now, there was back in the day, in the 80s, I think, 80s, late 80s, early 90s, where there was a Saturday morning cartoon of Conan the Barbarian. It was, made for kids, so there you go. This, of course, would be anime and not made for kids, so there you go. And the stories that I would like to see in animation, are the stories that are originally written by the creator of Conan, Robert E. Howard. This guy wrote the original Conan stories back in the 30s, late 20s, early 1930s. Unfortunately, committed suicide before he could write more. He wrote about 21 stories, of which I think 2 of them were novellas, and there were about 4 works that were unfinished and a couple that were unpublished afterwards, after his death, that were found. So these are the true and classic Conan the Barbarian tales. He wrote them, and they were published in that wonderful magazine that no longer exists in its, its current form is okay now. It's called Weird Tales, a very unique magazine coming out of the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So, yes, he wrote these stories. And Conan's stories, the Conan the Cimmerian, the Conan the Barbarian, all that good stuff. And the 4 stories that I've read thus far, I haven't read all 21, I would like to see 4 stories in particular made. And I think that we could do, again, this will be kind of like an OVA kind of deal. So it would only be 4 episodes, but each episode would be somewhere between 45 and 60 minutes long, depending upon, the breadth of the story. So here are the 4 stories that I want to put out there for you. So, The God in the Bowl. This is a weird Conan sort of murder mystery. Conan is coming into this place and he's trying to steal stuff, and a murder happens. And so even though he's there to do thieving and he's caught, and in Hyborian age you can go to death for that, there's this almost police procedural thing happens. As much as one can happen during the Hyborian age. For those of you who don't know what Conan is, Hyborian age is the age of time that Conan operates in. So it kind of goes on from that, and of course, given that it's Conan and that Howard Roberts wrote it, he comes across sort of some Cthulhu kind of stuff. So anyway, so The God in the Bowl is a really interesting kind of short story on that effect. The next one that I would like to see, which I think would be visually very interesting in terms of anime, that would be The Tower of the Elephant. That one was a very intriguing story. I'm kind of looking at it right now. So again, Conan is doing what Conan does best. He's in an inn and he's swinging ale and has a girl on an arm, and he's listening to a thief talk about this thing that in this tower, and that there's some prize at the top of the tower, and this master thief wants to get it. Conan decides he wants it too, and so the two of them kind of meet up, and they grudgingly decide to come together, join forces, and split the loot, so to speak. And it seems like a fairly benign tale of them robbing a place and killing people, until things go horribly wrong. And there are giant spiders, there are venom, there are death by horrible means. There is, at the end of it, a man with the head of an elephant. So, and I'm just going to leave it at that. See what I mean? Visually interesting. So the next story is The People of the Black Circle. The People of the Black Circle is... How to explain this one? So this is the kind of a story where we see the beginning, and so Conan starting to become a leader of men. He is able to put together an army during the course of the story. And this is about the time where Howard has decided that he's going to take Conan in the direction and make him king eventually. So for those of you who are familiar with the Conan comics, there is a King Conan comic out there, and some of the stories that Howard writes are from the viewpoint of Conan becoming a king or having been a king. So this story is about him starting on that journey. And it starts off with basically him kidnapping a noble's wife or bride to be, and hitting the desert and having all these different interested parties wanting to grab this woman because politically she's important. And of course, one of the bane of Conan's existence are sorcerers, and so there's the people of the Black Circle send out their people as well, and there's a renegade among them. And this is a very turns into at one point a very Dungeons and Dragons kind of story, where he just kind of goes through the place and monsters and mayhem and death and destruction, and then at the end of it is a grand royale battle between two armies. It's a very interesting story. Now the last short story is a King Conan story that Howard had written, and it's called The Scarlet Citadel. And this is a story where, and I'm not spoiling anything, where at the beginning of it, Conan takes a small army out to help somebody, but it's a trap. He loses the battle, and he's taken away in chains. And the rest of the story is basically him being able to escape this dungeon with very Cthulhu-like things going on, and making his way, killing the people he needs to kill, and then trying to take back his kingdom. This is a great, solid King Conan story, and I think that with the right animation, this could look very good. So yeah, this would be something that I would definitely put a lot of money behind. Good music, the whole 9 yards, and good animation, good story. This would be something that would deserve the budget, so to speak. So yeah, Conan anime. What do you think? Conan the Anime. Wouldn't that be awesome? Okay, so the last set of books, I should say, that I would like to see in anime form, if I had the budget to do it, and the budget to do it right, I would definitely like to do some stories from this collection of books, and it is called Wild Cards. Wild Cards was written originally between the mid-'80s to early '90s. There have been subsequent books pushed out since then, but we're talking about the original first 3 volumes. And I know I've talked about Wild Cards on the channel here before, so I'll just briefly tell you what it is. And these are stories, a collection of stories with a loose story arc between all of them. And each volume has one big story arc tale with a bunch of little stories that tell the big story, so to speak. And volume 1 is really amazing. And it is edited by George R.R. Martin, yes, of Game of Thrones fame. So he got a whole bunch of other science fiction writers to do short stories for this collection of books. And the point of the book is that a thing comes from the sky from a different planet, lands on Earth, and people in a certain radius get mutated. And they come up with either powers that are very beneficial to them, which are called aces, or they are powers that give people abilities but somehow disfigure them, or there's some horrible price to pay with getting these powers, and they are called jokers. So with that knowledge, here are 2 different animes that I would like to make using the Wild Card first 3 volumes. Now, the first thing that I would do would probably be 30 Minutes Over Broadway, and that is the actual story that tells how everyone got mutated. So, and it has to do with a guy named Jet Boy, this is set in post-World War II, 1947, and Jet Boy has fought in World War II. He's fought in Germany, and he's fighting in Japan against the Japanese, where his plane kind of gets shot up, and he lands on a desert island for about a year, and he is rescued, and he comes back to Manhattan, and he tries to go live his life. His former foes are, basically more or less retired. There's nothing for him to fight. There's nothing for him to do. He actually winds up selling his famous plane. His plane is one of the first jets ever made in the world, hence his name, Jet Boy, and his adventures, which are detailed in books and comics back home. He comes back home, he's living off the royalties, and he's just kind of going through that PTSD kind of thing of like, I got nothing in this life. There's nothing here for me kind of thing going on. And one of his foes gets a phone call from a conspiratorial doctor that he works with, and says, hey, this thing fell from the sky, and we're checking it out. And over the phone he hears like these horrible things happen, and the evil doctors is like, I'm intrigued, and goes out there and says, okay, I think I know what this is. And he uses his brains, his intellect to get this what looks to be a meteorite, but actually it's a piece of a spaceship, and together, and makes a bomb out of it. And he threatens New York City. He's hovering over a mile above Broadway, so to speak, and he's threatening to drop this bomb he knows he's gonna mutate everybody, but everyone else thinks it's like an atom bomb or whatever. So they send Jet Boy to the rescue, and Jet Boy goes up, and the rest of the tale I will leave to you to read because it's interesting, but it gives how the wild card world began. And I think that would make an interesting anime movie. Now, the other anime that would make out of this would be another 26 episode story arc of one of the more interesting characters in the wild card series, and his name is Fortunato, and he's an interesting guy. So when things happened, he was able to gain tantric powers. He's a very powerful ace, and he can do a lot of things. But here's how his powers activate: tantric sex. So basically, at the moment that he's ready to be happy, everything stops, and this power builds up in his head, and it actually enlarges his forehead somewhat. And so he's able to store an amount of power that enables him to do sort of almost magical things. Like he can do some telekinesis, telepathy, be able to see into the past. If he touches an item, says, I'm touching a USB port, and I'm able to see what happened in the past 24 hours concerning this USB port. He can do things like that. And but the thing about Fortunato is that he is a pimp. He runs an actual. His mother. He's half Japanese, half African American, and of course, this tale starts in the late '60s, and so obviously you know what's going on, right? And so he learns through his mother how to run a geisha brothel, and that's what he does. So he is a very much a high-priced pimp. His ladies are very. It's not just the sex, it's the whole geisha experience, right? So that's what he's training these women to do. His women start getting murdered in awful, gruesome ways, like sacrificial, like, cut out your heart kind of things. And he's a pimp, so he can't have this. So he goes on and he uses his powers, and in the first book, and then that sets up a long running story arc with the Masons and Cthulhu himself. So if you go over that storyline, which goes over a long period of time in the Wildcard universe, it's a very interesting tale. The character Fortunato is very dark, anti-hero kind of guy, but you feel for the guy. He's redeemable. He is looking to save the Earth, right? He's just like, oh well, it's not just about me being pimp, right? I actually gotta save this place. So it's a very, very interesting, compelling story. If you ever get a chance to read it, by all means do so. But if I were to make this anime, which I would really love to do, this would definitely be adults only, not hentai or ecchi or anything like that, but dealing with some stuff. So yes, that is the last thing that if I were to able to have the money to produce anime, that's it. There you go. All right. So that's it for this week. If I had the money and I was able to produce anime, these are some of the animes from books that I would love to make as an anime, to have in show and have on stream on Crunchyroll or whatever. How about you? What's a book that you've read that you think could be a really good anime? And it could be anything. It could be fantasy, it could be sci-fi, it could be romance, it could be a healing kind of thing going on. What do you think? Put your opinions down low. Keep it clean. Anyway, so that's it for this week. Next week I will have that review of that one anime. It's an interesting one. But I should have that up for you. And then the week after that, the July 4th weekend, there won't be an upload simply because not because I get to enjoy the July 4th weekend, but because I have to do inventory that weekend. Yay! Anyway, so that's what it's going to look like for the next 2 or 3 weeks or so. And but still, remember, going to Gen Con. If you're going, like to see you there, like to say hi, like you to say hi to me and Brent. And to that effect, stay good, stay well, because I love you guys and want to talk to you in person. Okay, you guys have a good one.